Check, check.
Good evening, everyone. We're here to conduct the business of the Port of Bellingham for our regular meeting for Tuesday, April 9th, 2024. Welcome, everybody. We usually start these meetings with a public comment period, so just be thinking about something if you want to say anything to us. In the meantime, roll call. Commissioner Shepard.
Present.
Commissioner Briscoe. Commissioner Bell is here. And we will now open this up to public comment. We will have another public comment period at the very end of the meeting. So in case we irk you somewhere during the middle of the meeting, feel free to stand up. We'll start with Dan Tucker.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dan Tucker with the Wakamokie Waterfront Coalition. I just wanted to invite all of you and everyone in this room to the Tide to Table 24 Gala happening April 20th, so it's coming up. You can get tickets and info on our website, and all of this goes to support our programming and promoting the port's work and the maritime trades and the maritime economy here in Bellingham, as well as our Northwest Maritime Apprenticeship Program and all of the other cool things that the foundation is doing. So Tide to Table 24, hope to see you guys all there. WakamokieWaterfront.org. Thanks.
That was quick. Jonathan Anderson.
I didn't realize I was going to get called on. Good afternoon, everybody. Jonathan Anderson
Oh,
with
you thought
Island
this
Tuck and
was a
Barge.
sign-in sheet.
Excuse me?
You thought it was a sign-in sheet? You don't really want to
Jonathan Anderson with the Island Tuck and Barge out of Seattle, Washington. I'm in the industry that is seeing a lot of support being lost. And having a short meeting with some of your people this afternoon, I see the Port of Bellingham is open to helping that void get filled. I really appreciate this port for the view that they have, the people we talked to today, of supporting the industry and getting shipyards back up and vibrant. We've lost several shipyards down in the south end for bigger craft. That this port will support that. It would generate a lot of revenue from the tugboat industry, the barges industry, in the commercial industry as a whole. People that don't understand the industry that we're in, we're being overregulated by the United States Coast Guard. They just started this program called Subchapter M. And for the fishermen in this industry, they need to be aware that it's coming down your pike. The Coast Guard is really putting the teeth into our industry. With that being said, the support from dry docks and the dry dock facilities and the support from people like you, we're being overregulated and strangled. So it's good to hear that this port is going to open up and maybe be a partnership with us in the commercial industry. And I really appreciate it, and I thank you for your views, if they are what your other people say they are. Subchapter M is coming down to the fishing industry. It is going to cap. It is going to happen. Shipyards shutting down is really hurting us. This state of Washington is going to see revenue leaving this state going down to Portland, and it's going to go up to Canada. And unfortunately for us, with the Jones Act, which people understand the Jones Act, we can only do so much work in a foreign shipyard. This place becoming vibrant for the shipyard industry will bring a lot of revenue into this area. And I appreciate your views if they are what the people we talked about earlier. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I ask you a real quick question? Sorry about this, guys. When you say shipyard, can you define for us what you put under that umbrella? You're from the northeast part of the state.
I'm from down in South End, Seattle.
I hear the Boston accent.
I'm originally from Boston.
Yeah.
Very vibrant back there still, and there's a lot of support back there. What I mean by the shipyard, it's support companies, i.e. the welders, the electricians, the work, the painters, everything that goes along with the shipyard industry. There's a lot of shipwrights. It's a dying breed. So the people that do the woodwork in the vessels, people that do the electrical, people that do the plumbing, people that do the welding. It's a very vibrant community. If you're not in it, you're not aware of it because people see a boat going up and down. There's a lot of, look at your houses. Look what goes on into your house. That plus goes into a vessel. The craftsmanship is vital for us as a whole. And it's if you guys are that port that is going to say, yes, we'll take care of the shipyards. Shipyards meaning ways, graving docks, and dry docks. There is quite a bit to the marine industry. The ocean's the biggest part. Your port is the window to the world. You look out, some people look out that bay and they say, this is just water, or this is a beautiful bay. From that bay, I can go anywhere in the world. We work off the Duwamish shipyard. From the Duwamish River, I can go to Africa. I can go to wherever I want. If I don't have the structure, I don't have the infrastructure, I don't have the support, we get shut out. Our boats fall apart. This city, Seattle City, this state as a whole is going to lose that because we're going to be looking at Canada. Who wants to go to Canada? I'm not picking on Canadians if there's any Canadians here. But we don't want to go to Canada. We've got federal regulations that tie us to a Jones Act, so I can only do so much work in Canada. We can do all that work here. We can do it all in this state. But if you guys support it, it would be great because there's going to be, believe me, if the industry happens up here like some people want it to happen, we will be up here. Voss will be up here, and they're already here, but they'll be here not pushing boats around. They'll be here putting revenue into this community as a whole. You might have more people showing up to your events. So I appreciate your time, really.
Thank you for your comments.
I have one more question for you.
Yes.
You stepped up and opened up the
Yes, I did.
tonnage. What kind of tonnage are we talking?
As far as vessels,
Vessel size, tonnage-wise?
we have that's a and tonnage. When you're talking tonnage, different regulations.
Yeah, are we 150,000 ton boat, or are we 50 ton boat, 100 ton boat?
We've got
200?
500 tons.
500 tons.
We've got 2,000 tons. We've got 400-foot barges. We've got 300-foot barges. We've got 140-foot boats. We've got 65-foot boats. We've got 35-foot boats. And that's just us. And that's just us. I could keep a shipyard here busy, again, with Subchapter M. The big thing for the boats are regulated by the American Bureau of Shipping or another class society. That's all we had to use. That's all we had to worry about before. Now we've got the Coast Guard. Now, instead of doing it every 60 months on a U-Wild, I can explain that later, but a U-Wild, I only had to do 24 to 36 months. With the Coast Guard, unless I'm in the UL program, that one boat that you see out there has to go in the dry dock twice in 5 years. What's that? That's people working on the beach. So that's, again, instead of 60 months, now I'm doing it 24 to 36 months. Same vessel twice 5 years instead of one time in 5 years. Look around here for all the boats, commercial industry. Now you're seeing the potential for what's going to come into this port. I'll give a guy 18 shipyards in the next 5 years if it is here or wherever it's at. I don't want to go to Canada.
So your
Further
barge,
questions?
so your barge, what's your barge width, your length you're speaking to?
Again, that depends on what we're hauling. We've got barges that are 90-foot wide that will go to wherever people will pay to go. Primarily, we go to Alaska. The widest barge we have is 90 foot.
So when you're pulling those out, are you pulling them out on skids, or are they pulling them out on a cradle, or how are they pulling those out?
Some people do it on bags. Again, it's the work that needs to be done. I can't haul it out on bags. It's not the preferred method. The preferred method, of course, is you guys lost the faithful servant, or Fairhaven, the dry dock that left.
We haven't lost it.
Well, it's down in Everett. It's being. It's,
You're talking about the floating dry dock. So that's
Yes.
what I was getting at. So the best method for pulling those barges out is the floating dry dock.
yes.
Okay.
Or a graving dock.
Or what?
A graving dock. Graving docks is basically you dig a hole in the
Oh,
earth.
okay, right. You pull
And
and
you
pump it out.
Yes,
Okay,
and that's
I got you.
typically you want that 6 foot below your grade. A barge can get down to 5 foot, 6 foot, depends on the barge, or even up to 3 foot. So you need to have a hole in the ground at least 10, 12 feet to float the barge in, to put it on the blocks and pump the water out. So that's a graving dock.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Your tugboats you're speaking to, what are the tonnage on those guys?
The largest one we're running around right now is over 500 tons.
500 tons, okay. The reason I'm asking is I can't remember, I know we built the Sandra and the Stacy Foss on the south side here, but I can't remember the tonnage on what they were.
You can build. Island Tug and Barge happens to. If anybody knows what Fox Avenue is, it's a facility.
I'm actually going to say we're kind of in the weeds.
All right.
Yeah, it's
I wanted to talk to you about it.
It's where we built the state built the ferries before Todd Vigor. It was at Fox Avenue. There's a big building down there. They built the ferries in the building, and then they trolley the barge out. They'd slipped it over into their dock, and then put it in the water.
Okay.
So you can build something on the beach, and it's just a way of getting it from the beach into the water.
Your testimony is music to our ears, so thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Any further questions?
I got a lot of questions, but he's not gonna let me ask them.
I'll show you a good coffee shop just down the road. Brian Stone,
Okay, well,
you're going
I
to
don't know if
continue
I really
this.
need to say anymore. I think my buddy John already did most of the talking here, but John's an old friend of mine, an old customer. And anyways, the reason I brought him over was because I'm just a little guy here saying that, if you guys help me grease the wheels and figure out how to rehabilitate what Bellingham used to have, we're going to have the customers, because it's not just Johnny, it's him and all the guys in his industry that are all looking for another place to do this. Right now, I currently own a small company that's working on the Hannah. We got 16 guys right there right now. I got 6 guys working up in Alaska. We're still a small thing. But I used to be part owner of a company that's still functioning in Tacoma called Motive Power Marine. And what we did was we took our knowledge from Alaska, brought it down to the port of Tacoma, and we actually were rolling barges out on bags. So there's a couple, things we've been looking at around here. And our purpose today was just say, hey, we're here. We want to figure this out with you guys. He's got the business. His buddy's got the business. So I'm into building new vessels as well as, repair and stuff like that. So, just want to introduce myself, say hi, and meet you guys and just have a little chat about it. But I think Johnny already summed it up here. So thank you very much.
Thanks. It's a constant struggle, and it is a battle that we will wage from our end. If you're looking at the three of us,
We don't like the word gentrification. How's that?
we just need your support from time to time when those battles come up. So thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to the port on any issue, any topic? Anybody online, just raise your hand or make yourself known. Unmute your mic. Feel free to chime in.
So we've changed the procedure a bit since the last meeting, and some things happened that we didn't want to happen, and you can no longer unmute your mic. So you have to raise your hand, and then Carrie will prompt you to unmute your mic, and then you'll be able to have to unmute your mic, and then you'll be able to speak.
I'd like some background on why that policy is.
Watch the last meeting, and it'll be really clear.
This is the camel's nose under the tent. It won't be long before that policy's in place for commissioners.
We're trying.
Anybody online wishing to speak, just raise your hand and we will unmute your mic or go through the process of unmuting your mic. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our regular agenda, and then just know we will have another public comment period at the end of the meeting. All right, just wanted to start out with our advisory committee schedule. Our Marine Advisory Committee is on April 16th. It's moved back here to the Harbor Center room. So be here at 6 p.m. for the Marine Advisory Committee. Our Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee, our BIAC meeting, is on April 18th. That is going to be at the ARF building on 2005 West Bakerview Road. That will be, again, April 18th at 4 p.m. for our Airport Advisory Committee. With that, we can move to our consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent agenda items A through J. And I just wanted to make a comment that from item C, we removed Gary Nelson's vessel. He made a $1,000 payment, and he worked with Tiffany DeSimone on a payment plan. So that's it.
Thank you, Karen. Anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I just had some questions on H about from the airport. I wanted a little bit more background on what was going on. There's kind of a lot happening in that memo, and I could use a little bit more background.
Either Emily or Kip, you want to step up and give us some background on that?
I actually pulled that myself.
Kip Turner, Director of Aviation. Happy to help start fielding the questions. If we get too deep, I do have some slides we could pull up if we need to. So, but I'll start with the questions and see where we are. Okay.
Well,
I just want to be walked through it a little bit more. There was a little bit too much going on for me to feel I understood everything in the memo. So if you could help make sure we understand what is happening, if we're just postponing projects, if we're losing out on any AIP funds, or if, and what's driving the decisions.
and I was going to do the same thing. My hope was that you could give us a 20,000-foot view of what drove the decisions and why we're moving and where it's moving from. And
Yeah, absolutely.
we love the fact that we've got some new eyes on the airport, so welcome home.
Oh, thanks. So we've got just a handful of slides here, and I'll touch on these, and then we can backtrack or we can dive as we go. So you guys sort of guide me on how you want. Excuse me. The runway safety area project was a project that started, I believe, about 1.5 years ago. Is that right, Aaron, Emily? Well, 4 years ago? Okay, so long before my time, but we're putting the buttons on it and wrapping it up, which is a good thing. So the money that you see allocated in here in the request for today is to close that project out. And that is additional port funds of $48,104. So this is literally the tail end of this project, of a 4-year project. This was a compliance project that the FAA required. Several years ago, I'm dating myself a little bit here, but probably 15, 20 years ago, the FAA came out with a mandate for runway safety areas that were not in compliance. They had a pretty long shelf life for that mandate. And then all of a sudden it got controversial, and then when it got controversial, the shelf life shrunk, and FAA said, okay, you either fix the RSA, the runway safety area, or you go to another form of EMAS or something like that, which is not very cost beneficial and not very safe. So the airport did the right thing, the port did the right thing. They figured out how to get the grant money and go ahead and accelerate the project. And as of 4 years ago, that went underway. And then I think it ran into some things. I wasn't here, but we can pull the team up if you need to know where that project got sidetracked over the course of time. The good story is that it's at the end of the project, and we just need this to close it out for this particular project. Any other questions on that one before I move on the runway safety area? The next one you're probably a little more familiar with of recent. I know I have in the 5-6 months that I've been here. Also, a project that is concluding, if you will, is the snow removal equipment building. It houses our snow removal equipment out at the airport. The FAA requires if you have snow removal operations and you get equipment through the grant funding, which most of our equipment has come through, that you be able to house that equipment. So the port, in a studious fashion, started proceeding towards that a couple of years ago, right? Time frame. Again, I have to look over here because I've only been here 5 or 6 months. I can't remember when everything was started based on coming in. But good story is on this, even though this project did run a good bit over from what was anticipated, those changes were brought to you as that project unfolded and was unpacked. So the commission has already heard about those changes that took place leading us to this amount. The item that's in here for today is a final allocation to close that out, which is actually a positive allocation here. This was some grant money that was received from an amendment about a year ago or within the last year. And that amendment was actually a positive note to our budget. It needs to be applied to the budget in the right place, and that's what this is doing here. So this is actually a positive note of where we're putting $594,000 from a grant amendment into the budget. The next item, yep, go ahead.
Kip, when these go over costs, does the FAA continue to contribute at 90% and we're in our 10%? Do we still hold that same ratio for cost when things get more expensive like this?
The projects are eligible. If it's an FAA-approved project, they're usually eligible for a up to 15% contingency. Unless it's, there was some CARES Act projects that were actually 100%, so they would not have a contingency factor per se. But this was a normal AIP, Airport Improvement Program project, and it does have eligibility for up to 15%. You never know if you're going to get the 15% until the project's concluded, closed out, and then you submit your contingency request. And usually what happens is those contingency requests go into the FAA, they go into a bucket of all the other airports in their region, and, you know, timing's important for that, for being first in, trying to get the, you know, the early bird gets the worm, so to speak, on a lot of times on the money. Sometimes they have extra money, sometimes they don't, but you never know on the 15% contingency. So when those items are brought to you for approval on those kind of things, you know, there is that little bit of that Vegas gamble, I guess, so to speak. We do think that we'll be able to get some contingency money on a couple of the projects that we're talking to you about today. And but you know, it is a little bit of a gamble to be able to sit here and say exactly how much that would be. But luckily, the request that we have, even the total request today, still comes in under what we already had allocated for 2024. So we're not actually asking for anything above what we did at budget time, actually a little less. The other item that we're needing to funnel a little money into, another $5,000 to wrap up, is a Jet A fuel farm rehabilitation. This project started about a year ago too, I believe, and is on its final stages. It basically was going as planned, and then when the contractor got in there doing the work, he discovered a few other things that needed to be done on this to make it right. I think those a couple of items are listed for you there. As far as fuel dispensing and water detection systems, and repair and replace the dead man shutdown control system. Those are things that weren't known until the contractor got in there. So about another $5,000 wraps that project up and gets that back open, which is very vitally needed right now. So that's one we're excited is close to coming to fruition and being complete. And then we get into really the bigger item that really changed a lot of what our CIP looks like for 2024. It became known, at least it became to my attention, that the runway lighting system was in grave concern from a maintenance standpoint. The team was had aware that we had runway lighting issues for a while. And matter of fact, it had already previously once been put in a CIP for consideration, and then it got juggled around due to other high priority projects, including the runway coming up and things of that nature, and some hot spots that the FAA wanted us to try to address. Long story short, we feel the runway lighting is now at a point where that it needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. The maintenance issues have gotten more complicated. We're getting a lot of leakage on the runway lighting of every time they try to fix a light that's gone out, or a series of lights that have gone out. Trying to track that down is getting harder and harder. Usually, or a lot of times, when you do a major runway reconstruction, which we had one back in 2010, you would see that would also oftentimes be a time period when they would go ahead and redo the lighting. That did not happen here in 2010 when the runway reconstruction happened here. Probably just wasn't needed at the time, and therefore wasn't funded and put into play. But because of that, that runway lighting system has another 14, 15 years on it now, in addition to what life had already had on it prior to that. So it's really past its life cycle. And we're really concerned about that, obviously, just keeping current operations, because it's hard to bring in planes at night if you're having runway lighting issues. So we want to make sure that we're staying on top of that. We went and talked to the FAA about that, because we also, when we bring you a 5-year CIP, we also bring them a 5-year CIP. And it's a partnership, and we all have the understanding. And usually, leadership, boards and commissions, and neither of the FAA, nobody really likes moving CIP items around unless there's really justification for it. We felt the justification was really there for the runway lighting, and so we went and had a discussion with FAA. They agreed. They realized it's going to mean we have to shuffle a couple of other projects that we had in our 5-year CIP with them, predominantly the taxiway Alpha, Charlie, and Delta. Not Alpha, but Charlie, Delta, and Echo. Work that we have planned for, I think it was actually planned for next year originally, but now it'll be reshuffled to a later year. And it'll allow us to better position ourselves for the 2 priority items that we think are the highest priority. The lighting being number 1 for today, and then the next highest priority is our runway mill and fill, I call it, or basically when you get a top layer on the runway, about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and you get new striping and you do those kind of things. We've got that planned for 2026, and we're doing the design for that in 2025. So what we're doing is moving. We had that design planned for this year, so we had some money already allocated for that design, almost $1.8 million. And so we're taking that money, we're throwing it with some bill money that we already have access to, that the airport and the port already has in its reserve banks, and we've got the nod from the FAA to fund this lighting effort and get this done this year, and then we're going to reprioritize the taxiway realignment efforts that we have for Charlie, Delta, and Echo to another year, put the runway rehab in position for 25 and 26 for runway design, and then the actual work in 26. We also felt the numbers that were previously allocated to that runway rehab in 26 are probably going to be on the low end. So we wanted to go ahead and try to pool up some more money of our reserve that we have in both BIL funding and through our Airport Improvement Program funding to try to be prepared for that, so that we can do that. That's the main thing on the lighting, and I think I skipped right by it, but I didn't have a slide on it. I'm sorry. If I did, I passed it. But anyway, there was maybe it was towards the end. I got sidetracked on this. I apologize. I was thinking I was on the lighting. I was following the thing here. But the project you actually have on the screen in front of you is a different area, a project. It's a project that came known to us here recently through some recent inspections from both the FAA and the TSA, Transportation Security Administration. And we get inspected from those entities annually. And these are projects that have recently come out of the inspections that we just had from FAA literally in the last month, about a month ago. And they want us to clean a little bit of the object-free area down in the runway safety area, and then a couple of the other object-free areas that you see illustrated here. And the first estimates that we have to do that are noted here, equating to about a total of $226,000, I think it is. This project shows one of them, and then this is the other one. We had about $50,000 in operations budget set aside for that. So we're looking to fund the rest of that and meet those compliance measures for the FAA. And
So my question on that one was that was actually an inspection that drove that one. That wasn't an internal operational issue that we felt we needed to address. It was actually an inspection that flagged it.
Absolutely. Yeah, this one and the one before, both as results from recent inspections. Correct, yeah. And discrepancies noted by both of those entities that we're forced to do this. Yeah, absolutely. So we're responding to those directives.
And what was the budget for the, I don't have it in front of me.
These two together were $226,000. If I recall correctly, let me look here. Pretty sure I do.
I'm looking while you're looking.
Yep, the ROFA, runway object-free area and runway safety area, that's a different project from that initial one that I talked about. This is the clearing.
226.
226, yeah.
That's the current estimate, not the budget.
Pardon?
That's the current estimate. That's not the budget, right?
Correct, that's the current estimate. Yeah, the only thing we had budgeted was maintenance.
50 grand.
About 50
Commissioner
grand.
asked what the budget was, yeah, so it's 50,000.
I'm sorry, yeah, I misunderstood the question.
So I was actually more on his vernacular than you accountants. Thank you for correcting me. Somebody got spanked.
Yeah,
Just,
You and I can talk in English later.
remind me, the realignment of those taxi lanes, was that for like restriping where planes were able to turn in and off the runway for like a safety upgrade, or what was the?
yeah,
project?
so a few years back, another one of the initiatives from the FAA was to identify areas that they call hot spots. And it was, even though those have been in place for 40, 50 years, the FAA determined that, maybe there's a better idea for alignment for those. So it was a project that was inserted into the CIP based off that guidance. But even the FAA, when we went and talked about the priority of the projects that we have in front of us for the lighting, which I guess is this one, I'm sorry, it was this slide that I was looking for when the lighting. Yeah, should have started there.
That should be your lead, right?
Yeah, it's actually the last slide, I think, or close to it. But anyway, when we talked to the FAA about the priority of the projects, they agreed that the lighting was definitely a higher priority than the hotspots. So we've got full partnership from the FAA and going forward with this if you guys approve this. And this is just a summary that you had in the back, but I'm happy to go over any of it as well. And Tamara helped with this as well. I don't know if she's here today, but
Thanks, Skip. I got what I needed there.
you bet. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not done with you. But now I'm afraid to speak. The total reallocation shows 34,000, but that's a net plus and net minus. So part of what I'm trying to get to is, I understand you took quite a bit of chunk out of stuff that was scheduled for 2025 and is now scheduled for 2026. And that's where the majority of the funds are. We're reallocating those funds.
No, sir. Really what we did is we're bringing to you a request today that we found our own funding for. We just need the permission to reallocate the money and do it. So we had this money already in the system for 2024. We're just moving it around to higher priority projects is about the simplest way I know to put it.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear, yeah. And then just in general, how much are you seeing cost escalate for projects like this from year to year? I mean, you seeing a tremendous increase from what we budget?
I really have, yeah. In the last 5 years, it's no different than the many stories I'm hearing on the marina front with the projects that we're doing as a port here on the marina. It's the same thing in our industry at the airport, particularly since just before COVID, during COVID, and since most of the capital projects I've been involved with have tremendously increased in cost, just phenomenal. The percentages are nothing like I've seen in my 30-year career.
And at this point, we don't have any expectation that we're going to replenish any of the funds that we had in reserve. We're just utilizing a good chunk of those.
Yeah, so a couple of things there. We've got some bipartisan infrastructure law money that we were allocated that actually has a shelf life on it. So we're using some of that for this lighting project, for example. Now, that was money that we did not have in this year's budget, but it's money that we had in our reserve for a project like this. It has a shelf life of 26 or 27, part of it that we're using up, or that we're using towards this. And again, the other big factor, at least that concerned me when I looked at the existing 5-year CIP that we had, I did not feel like, based on the escalations that I've seen on projects in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, I did not feel like we had those at good figures that would be probably covered. So I was trying to make sure that, hey, let's focus on what's really priority number one. Let's make sure we can fund those. And then if we've got money left after those, if we get lucky enough to fund the priority projects and there's money left, we can always come back and say, hey, we got some money left. We want to add something else back in. But I'm really concerned about funding the 2 big projects. So I'm trying to make sure we pool our resources right to do the 2 big projects that we know are number one priority safety-wise for the airport.
And how do you feel about funding the 25, 26?
I feel better if we do this measure here because we're also punting, if you will, sports analogy, the taxiway Charlie Delta and Echo project, which is going to free up 8 or 10 million that we had in there for, to me, which is going to probably largely get absorbed on the runway project. I think the runway project is going to run higher than what everybody was estimating. I hope I'm wrong, but I believe the runway project's going to run higher than what was being estimated. I'll be glad to be wrong if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty afraid that it will.
And FAA is going to drive the timing of that. Will they give you so much latitude and then?
You know, they really are driving because we're slated for 26, which is another reason it concerns me. We've got 2 other big things that are going to drive that funding fiasco. One is I'm already aware of 2 other airports in the region that are doing runway projects that year. And the type of pavement that we use at the airport is a P401. It's a very special pavement. So it's not as abundant as your highway pavement. So your contractor pool is already limited, which means when your contractor pool is limited, we all know that drives the demand and the cost up. So I'm already concerned about escalated costs because of the other airports that are getting a runway paving in the same year. And then on top of that, that's the World FIFA Cup that Aaron was pointing out to me. The FIFA Cup is in 2026, and we're going to be very busy. So I'm worried about doing a runway project in a year where we're going to be extremely busy at the airport. But when you're on the FAA's docket to do something in a certain year, they've already been working behind the scenes in their pools of money to make sure they've got the discretionary that that we might be asking for. So we sort of still have to stay in line where we're in line, if you will, or we lose that opportunity. And we need to do the runway project in 2026. So as painful as it's going to be, we need to be prepared for it, both financially. I think this will be a step that helps us be a little more financially prepared, and then we've got to figure out how to be prepared for it with the FIFA. Am I saying that right? Is it FIFA? Yeah, the FIFA World Cup. Yeah.
I just have one more unless you guys. My last one is just a request. As we go through these things, I would ask that you just be not conservative, but project realistically the cost of those going forward, even with escalators that are realistic, and not trying to meet a budget, but trying to be, boots on the ground, real for what we're experiencing in this economy and what you expect in 2026 for costs.
Okay.
So by the time they hit the budget, I'd rather see a cost that's inflated for that, with that explanation, and meet that budget than to undershoot it and then try to find the money later to fill in that gap. That's just my request. I just think it's.
Totally understand and agree. And I think the team had done an excellent job on preliminary estimates. I really do. It's just a different set of eyes looking at it with a different level of experience on capital projects on airports. And again, I hope I'm wrong, but I'm fearful that that number is not adequate. And this will help us have a more adequate number.
I'm out in the marketplace and I just see things going through the roof, and I just know my biggest pet peeve is not having enough money in my budget for what the costs are. And in this environment, it's rough.
It is.
To predict.
Yeah. It's vastly more expensive for the same project that you could have done a third less of the price 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Or half the price.
Okay,
Is that it?
thanks, that's all I got.
Right, thank you.
All right. Motion to approve consent agenda items A through J.
Nobody else has anything to, I'm fine? Okay. All those in favor, Commissioner Shepard?
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell is a yes. Thank you. Kip, thanks. Emily, thanks.
All the staff at the airport, thank you.
We know he didn't do that alone. Oh,
We got new staff.
Presentations.
What's it gonna speak to? Oh, the tube.
so Brian, you're up next. So good to see you, one of my favorite people. This is a presentation for local government and affairs for Puget Sound Energy, their clean energy update. Brian Heinrich.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to present today. Brian Heinrich with Puget Sound Energy. And I have it's a pretty sizable deck here, so I might, depending on time and questions and what have you, I may eject out of it after, say, 12 or so slides. But wanted just to give you a snapshot. First, I think of who we are as a company, the regulatory environment that PSE is operating in, and then some specific programs that we have as well. So as you can see, we serve 1.5 million customers, and I'll explain a little bit further. But we're undergoing a fairly significant transformation as an energy utility. And I'm probably going to linger on this slide for just a little bit, because this, I think, sets the framework for just about everything that we're working on as a utility, how it affects our customers. And so the first one, Clean Energy Transformation Act, that's from 2019. What CETA commits Washington to do is phasing out of coal by 2025. So PSE currently has a coal facility that will be shut down effectively by the end of next year. What CETA also requires is carbon neutral electricity supply by 2030 and 100% clean electricity by 2045. So that is a fairly ambitious target right now. Generation for us today is coal, natural gas is about 50%, and then the other 50% are a combination of renewable sources, so primarily wind and solar. Second significant piece of legislation, which was passed in 2021, is the Climate Commitment Act. And that establishes a program to reduce carbon pollution and achieve the state's greenhouse gas limits that were established in state law. Some of you may be aware that that is the focus of an initiative this fall. I believe it is Initiative 2117, but don't hold me to that. And that initiative seeks to repeal the Climate Commitment Act. Clean Fuel Standard, also passed in 2021. That seeks to curb pollution from the transportation sector, which is about 45% of greenhouse gas emissions in Washington. And that's important to PSE, as you might imagine, because of the increase in electric vehicle purchasing, but also charging. That's a significant state and federal effort, and PSC's right in alignment with increasing charging for electric vehicles. And then the Clean Buildings Act, which was passed in 2019, that's the legislation that adopts new energy performance standards for existing commercial buildings over 50,000 square feet. And I did want to make note of this past legislative session, and you can see it up there as the decarbonization bill, House Bill 1589. For us, 1589 is a planning bill. I think it's probably, probably poorly understood out in the world on what it does, but what it allows PSC to do is plan for energy usage into the future, effectively looking at how do we, for lack of a better word, maybe combine both our electric side and our natural gas side. How do we plan for the future of both of those systems? Prior to 1589, those systems were planned separately, but parallel to one another. And so that's probably a good point to hit on. In Whatcom County, we're an electric-only county for PSE. So gas up here is provided by Cascade Natural Gas. As you move farther south, we are gas-only in portions of Snohomish, and we are a dual fuel in King, Pierce, and I think King and Pierce, maybe Kitsap. That was a fairly significant bill, as I said, in terms of allowing PSE to plan. We have, I think, a 3-year planning horizon for that effort. So I mentioned the CETA requirements around where we're headed in terms of emissions. So operations and electric supply, as you can see on the slide there, net zero carbon emissions for electric and gas operations. Our North Star in some respects right now is 2030. That's the carbon neutral. Tremendous amount of effort to meet those targets. We believe we're on track to meet those targets, but I think folks here are familiar with like the 80-20 rule. That first 80%, you can make really significant gains. That last 20% is very challenging. And just a reminder there that by 2045, carbon-free electric supply. I mentioned natural gas, which is further south for us, but again, looking at reducing customer end use and reducing those emissions, again, net carbon emissions by 2045, and then the beyond PSE reported emissions. I mentioned electric vehicles, liquefied natural gas for marine and long-haul trucking. We have a facility in Tacoma for that. Renewable natural gas, hydrogen, there's some of you may be aware of the federal initiative around hydrogen production. A tremendous amount of funding went into that effort. There's some here locally in Whatcom County. There's a PSE project in Lewis County that's a recipient of those federal funds. So as I mentioned, we are making progress towards the carbon-free or carbon-neutral electric. By the end of next year, we'll, like I said, we'll be coal-free, and we're targeting 63% renewable energy in our portfolio. To get there, we have been pretty aggressive in pursuing renewable energy resources. So some of you might have seen news about recent acquisitions that PSE's made east of the mountains in Montana. Pretty significant. These are primarily wind generation farms. They're not without their controversy over east of the mountains either. But that's the direction that we're headed. That is where a significant amount of our effort is going, is looking at wind and solar. And so I mentioned, some of the challenges east of the mountains are where do we site these large wind farms? They take up a tremendous amount of acreage, and I've yet to meet someone who doesn't have a strong opinion on a wind turbine. Either you think they're pretty cool or you absolutely hate what they do to the landscape. There's really no in between that I've met as of yet. So a couple of things just of note here. Obviously, demand for electricity is expected to increase significantly. And I did want to just point out the bullet second to the last there, the need for the electric grid to be expanded and modernized. That is a pretty significant undertaking. That's not just in Washington State, that's nationally. That's a concern from the utility nationally. There's concerns around the grid.
Talk to me about that a little bit. Are you funding that internally? Or are there federal dollars coming your way?
It's sort of all of the above. There are federal dollars for large-scale transmission. Yeah.
Can we get there from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. That is where we're headed. I mean, part of this is driven by just the topography, just the actual geographic challenge of generation sources that we're looking to east of the Cascades into Montana to get power to Western Washington. That's a tremendous amount of distance. There's a significant mountain range. I can't recall the last major transmission line that was constructed. I want to say it was maybe in the early 70s. So I think we can get there. There's new technology that's going to make that possible, I think. There's also, and I'll hopefully have a moment to cover this, but we're also looking at where do we generate and how do we generate differently. Wind and solar in Western Washington is not ideal. Solar, just from a, I guess, maybe like a cost effectiveness, you're going to get more solar east of the Cascades for the same size of array. But can we utilize solar in Western Washington to offset during, say, peak demand? Can we utilize things like battery energy storage systems to store power and use it to offset peak demand? Historically, the utility in the winter was peak demand. We're seeing that less in, as the summers become hotter, as AC becomes something that more people are pursuing, we're seeing our summer demand increasing. So, we're looking at what are those technologies that can help offset that peak demand. That was kind of a long answer for that. I'm sorry?
About nuclear stuff like they're using in Europe, the newer, not everybody thinks nuclear, thinking the old bomb type and the stuff that there's been a lot of problems with, the new age stuff that they're using there seems to be, are we talking about integrating that here anywhere?
Yes, in the Tri-Cities area, PSC's financial partner with Energy Northwest on a small modular reactor.
That type of reactor can replace our coal and natural gas generation where we have to have that at the peak times when everybody turns on their heater or turns on their stove, because solar and wind can't pick that up.
That's right. Yeah, you're spot on. The other challenge of at least wind in Washington State is peak generation is typically overnight, and that's when demand is at its lowest. So we have the abundant resource, but it doesn't align very, very well with peak demand. And so peak demand, generally speaking, for PSC is going to be, say, 6 to 8 a.m. in the morning, and then 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the evening. So that's typically, when I say peak demand, that's when we see the largest spikes.
What about our infrastructure, like Bellingham is trying to go all electric or says we're going all electric? And I know the PSC in the past is they don't have the power or the infrastructure to deliver the power here. Per se wire and underground lines, so on and so forth. Where are we with that?
It's a good question. I think I would probably say that when it comes to questions of do we have the power, it really depends on what the application is. Right now, we're not seeing a scenario where we don't have the generation capability.
Because we still have the coal and the natural gas running. That's right.
And as we add additional, I mentioned the increases in the renewable side, so the wind, that's going to offset that as well. So and I'll cover this in just a second. well, hopefully you'll see where we're at today, but where we need to be, and it's going to be pretty quick. In fact, let me just see if I can. Yeah, it's this next slide. So where we're at today, our owned and generating capacity is about 6,500 megawatts. To meet the CETA requirements that I mentioned, we're going to have to effectively more than double that. We believe that where we'll need to be, and you can see it on the graph there, where we're at today, last year, 2023, where we're going to need to be in 2030, and then the 15,000 megawatt requirement by 2045. And again, as a reminder, we're at about 6,500 right now. So to try and, kind of wrap your head around what's that equivalent to, you see, 700,000 residential solar panels. We're nowhere near that. 8 peaking plants. So Encogen just down the road.
We're talking just statewide?
That's PSE service territory. That's not statewide.
Okay.
So we serve, there's 7 million Washingtonians. We serve about 1.5 million of them. So our friends over across the mountains in Avista serve Spokane, much of eastern Washington, and then we got like Snowpud, Seattle City Light.
Just a little less than half of your customers are going to have solar panels on their roofs, is what I'm seeing here.
To meet that, that's what it would end up looking like. That's right. And you can see just a couple other things to point out. We contemplate, battery storage, wind turbines. All of those things are going to work together. There is no one thing that is going to solve this. It's going to be a combination of new technology, consumer behaviors, investments in infrastructure. All of those things are going to have to occur. Many of them are going to have to occur simultaneously, and we've got 21 years to do it. Easy enough, right?
Can you get there from here?
I think
That's going to be my recurring theme.
I think, I think you folks deal with this, and I'm sure folks out here do as well. It's really a question of how much are you willing to spend to achieve that goal? And part of the challenge of a utility is one, and this is not the challenge, we are heavily regulated, but the challenge is the rates that we all pay as customers inform that investment that we're going to make. And so we don't want to be mindful of, as is often the case with sort of utility expenses, do those costs disproportionately fall on folks who can't pay that bill? So we are absolutely mindful of that, and that is an ongoing conversation is, what is the rate at which you achieve your ambitions, and can folks afford that?
Yeah, I just look at the 700,000, just solar panels alone, and by the time you get all 700,000, it's going to be time to replace them.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So the expense just is.
Yeah, I really don't. And that's going to be the case with, just listening to the gentleman talk about the airport infrastructure. We're all effectively in the same, pardon the pun, we're all in the same boat, right?
Welcome to the port.
Yeah, thank you.
Lots of lifeboats. They're all tied up down here.
So I did mention some of these things already, just maybe to put a finer point on it. Energy consumption is likely to grow. We think right now about 15% in the next 20 years. Electrical vehicle charging is going to increasingly be more in demand. State and local building codes are more aggressive. The future, at least for like residential homes or even multifamily, is going to be all electric. That's a product of building codes. I mentioned increased installation of air conditioners. And I've talked to folks, your staff here at the port, we're seeing a trend in new large customer load requests. So what does that look like? That's data centers, those types of things. And there's that's where it is a challenge to forecast out because you don't know what is a data center need going to look like in the future. That may be not part of a forecast.
So one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you a little bit was we do have district energy down at the waterfront, and we do have a power plant that we're reliant on.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your plans for the plant, and our goal is to keep it district energy. There was a push from the zoning standpoint to push us to electrification of some of the heating units and other items down there, but personally, I thought that was a little bit foolish in light of the energy that we've already got there. So do you have a time frame? Can you talk to us a little bit about what your plans are for?
Yeah, for the foreseeable future, certainly to 2045, natural gas in the form of a peaking plant is going to be necessary. Think back, it's hard to even remember in some respects when on a day like today, but it wasn't that long ago. In fact, it was, 2 months ago, the end of January, when we had that really significant cold event. Things like Encogen is what kept the lights on, kept people's homes warm. So for that type of technology, I mentioned hydrogen a minute ago. That is where the investments made, I think, today around those new technologies, whether it's like a renewable natural gas or hydrogen improvements. Many of those plants like that can run on a different fuel. So they don't have to be natural gas. So you still get the generation capability, but you're burning a carbon neutral or carbon free fuel source. So maybe put differently, I think right now those types of plants are here to stay. I think they'll just be necessary. They might run on a different fuel. They might, they're going to have to be carbon free. But they'll still be a resource.
We have to have some type of generation plant. I mean, even through into the carbon neutral, clean, no, nothing. There's got to be some kind of generation plant because you can't pick a load up any other way.
That's right. That's right. I mentioned one of the things that'll be a part of this is customer use, is customer behavior around how do we use energy moving forward. Folks might recall, I'll reference that cold event from a couple months ago. Emails from PSE and from Cascade Natural Gas asking folks to conserve, which is not really the impulse when it's 10 degrees out. Your impulse isn't to turn your thermostat down. The good news is that folks did respond. Customer behavior during that time was a big component of making sure we got through that event. But absolutely, how folks use energy into the future, what that looks like, is a critical component of how we move this forward. So I want to talk just a little bit about a couple of things that sort of highlight that. And hopefully you're going to be familiar with some of these things because I think we're moving on a project on the port for solar panels. So distributed energy resources, think rooftop solar panels. I mentioned battery storage systems, EVs, those sorts of things. Ideally, what they'll allow is that two-way flow of energy. So one example might be if you have an electric car and you're plugged in during a peak, so those cars obviously have batteries. During a peak event, from a grid perspective, pull energy off of the car onto the grid to distribute it, and then when the peak event is over, you charge the battery back up. So it's a two-way flow as opposed to just a one-way plug-in sort of thing. So solar panels, we've got a number of, right now the program through PSE's community solar. Like I said, I think we're working with you folks right now on a facility to put solar panels. You're going to see this sort of grow in the coming years. Solar will be a big part of helping offset demand as we move forward. we see our role, see it there on the third bullet, as an energy orchestrator. It's really going to be the utility is going to be very different in the future than it was, say, 20 years ago. So 20 years from now, it's going to be very different in terms of how we manage all of the resources that are going to be available. Because again, it's not just going to be one. There's not going to be one sort of generation source. There's going to be multiple, and it's going to look different on a day-to-day basis. Demand response, I mentioned this just a minute ago. Conservation. We have programs to incentivize customers. They're, depending on your point of view, how successful those are, I think that's going to change as people get used to just changing how they light and heat and manage their homes. Again, third bullet is sort of illustrative there. It's really a nod towards reducing strain on the grid, and that affects that generation piece.
Brian, sometimes it seems that we run into some stumbling blocks that feel just administrative. Like we have lots of business or buildings with no trees or barriers blocking them that I think would be great for solar, but those buildings don't always have high load demand. They're not using a lot of power.
Yeah,
We struggle sometimes to get all of our meters to effectively talk to each other so we can generate power on a building that doesn't have much electrical need and move those credits or the kind of solar, the power that has been produced to meters that do have lots of demand and need. Some of those just seem like some very kind of bureaucratic or administrative functions that still create stumbling blocks. Because I think as a government, we're a willing partner. We have lots of resources here, lots of rooftops. We don't have a lot of trees in front of many of our buildings. I think we'd like to be as much of a partner as we can. It feels that it's been more challenging than I've expected, just trying to get some of these projects to pencil. And some of it seems bureaucratic or administrative.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. Maybe this might be an offline sort of thing, but there are some barriers around like net metering, I think is what you're talking about, where the building produces more energy than it uses. So when it goes onto the grid, who's buying, who's selling, all those things I believe can be figured out. They just haven't been in the past. And I think part of that is in a pre-CETA context, there wasn't really a reason to figure it out. It was easier to get to no than it was to yes. And I think the future is going to be getting to yes on those things. And I think you'll see programs that will reflect exactly what you're talking about. That in that scenario, the port could be at times you might be a generation source, right?
I think we could be.
I think you probably could be.
I think we have capacity to do those kind of things. And sometimes, whether it's the amount we can build with net metering to still make the net metering kind of maximum generation capacity, sometimes that is lower than our total rooftop space could produce.
Right.
Again, some of these administrative challenges that I think we need to work through. And, I really empathize. It's a big task to get to where we have to get to with power generation. I think the tension is sometimes it feels that PSC should have started the pedal on the gas a little sooner with some of the intensity, with some of the needs. And that's always the benefit of hindsight, of course.
Right.
But we certainly want to be a partner moving forward to solve these challenges together.
I appreciate that. I think a lot of conversations I've been having with folks is exactly on that point. I think in a pre-CETA world, it was a lot easier these relationships were transactional. And I think those days are largely over, and they're over not only because of the state legislation piece, but your own climate action planning. City of Bellingham, Whatcom County, all have climate action plans. And for you to achieve those ambitions, for those other jurisdictions to achieve those ambitions, we're the natural partner. We have state regulation that says we have to achieve those. Where do we look to do that? To your point around, could we utilize port buildings? That's exactly right. How do we create and foster and build those partnerships? I think you're absolutely spot on.
Perfect line of it, we have the power.
So let's see, where are we at here? I mentioned this a second ago as well. It's really the all of the above strategy. Commissioner, you asked about nuclear. That's the Form Energy. It's a 10 megawatt facility. Or I'm sorry, it's more than that. That's the 10 megawatt is a energy or a battery storage. We're looking to replace, the coal-fired plant is about 750 megawatts. So from a scale perspective, when we start looking at, that's just to get to what we generate today. We've got to go well beyond that. So yeah, nuclear is absolutely on the table. Form Energy, that's a long duration battery storage pilot. That might be something that's worth exploring. They require a tremendous amount of acreage, but the iron air technology doesn't run the risk of catching fire. That's the advantage of that. So, and then I mentioned earlier as well, Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub. There's, I want to say nationally, like $8+ billion for that effort, and some of that will be here in Wacom, and then the PSE project further south. Let's see. I mentioned the grid. We talked a little bit about that already, I think. That's a continual investment in that type of infrastructure. It's ongoing, and will be into the future. I am nearing the end. I did want to just talk about, from a safety perspective, as you might imagine, electric utility, it's probably similar to folks who work in marina, really cognizant of the inherent risk of that work. And we know, looking forward as well, that wildfires, and this wasn't something that we probably talked a whole lot about maybe 5-10 years ago in Western Washington, is threat of wildfire. It's a very real thing moving forward. And then there's other utilities in other states have worse experiences with wildfires than we've had. Hopefully avoid that moving into the future. I mentioned natural gas. I won't belabor that too much, just because it's not, it's not primary source here in Whatcom County, but obviously with the peaking plant, we do rely on that, and we'll continue, again, and probably, until we fully realize what that other technology is, natural gas will be a part of that portfolio. I mentioned this as well, just real quickly, in terms of where costs fall into, and who they fall on in terms of who pays more, who has the ability to, whether it's retrofit their own home or where they live, what those appliances are. We're sensitive to that as well. We do have a really robust bill assistance program. If folks are constrained on paying their energy bill, it's really a very easy call to our service center, or if they have access to email or the internet, it's very simple to apply. We really don't want to run into situations where people are going without power. That creates a whole host of other problems. Mentioned it, bill assistant program, and then I mentioned the equity piece as well. Just this is part of the state policy. Again, trying to avoid putting all of the burdens of this transformation, this transition, onto folks who can least afford it. You'll see in that third bullet, our commitment is at least 30% of the benefits of things like energy efficiency that they benefit underserved communities. this is the last slide. I think it's come up in your comments. It is incredibly complex moving forward, what this is going to look like. But this is where we're at as a utility, where we're headed. Happy to answer any more questions or any comments you might have.
The airport had a much stronger finish on their slide than, would you go to work on that?
I will. I'll pass that along.
Yeah.
I thought the turbines, I think they're
That's-
cool.
that's
I'll
not
just
bad,
put all
but
my
yeah.
cards on the table. So I think I like them, but that's not
I
everybody.
like them too. We
right.
just drove to Eastern Washington last weekend for a gymnastics meet. We got to see a whole bunch of them, and I think they're beautiful.
Yeah, there you go.
I fall on the other side of the spectrum.
I was just saying, the birds might differ with that.
Thanks. We're going to ask a few questions if you got time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So some of, I think, the interest in hearing this was we have been looking at trying to future cast some upcoming projects, things like electrification at our shipping terminal.
Yeah.
And we got some concerns with the feedback of, we're not sure we have the power to deliver to green light those kind of projects. I'm hearing you say you think you do have the power to afford those projects to get up and running. How does that meet with some of what we're hearing of some of these uncertainties? And I really think this is an all-in project. We all have to be doing our part. We can't just look to the utility to be the only one with generation and storage. And so we're happy to investigate those other options of generation and storage on site as well. But for us, getting some clear direction of, can we expect large demand projects like a shore power to be indefinitely held up?
Yeah. So this is as I'm coming to find out in my short time with PSE so far, that a lot of questions around, do you have the power? And I think the internal position we have is, and John Missioner and I were trading emails like a week or more ago on this very topic. Where we start as a company is doing a feasibility analysis. And what that requires in this case is you as the potential customer is really looking at what is all the information that you know to tell us how much you need, when you need it, what does that project look like? It's really hard to sort of, future cast in terms of like, we don't have a spare couple megawatts just in our back pocket. But if we know what your demand is and we know what that looks like, we can come up with an analysis that says, yeah, in fact, we do have this power, or we don't, which again, that hasn't really come up in my time with PSE. It's more like, what information do you have and how solid is your information so that we can run that analysis. Because if we do need to do any sort of infrastructure upgrades or whatnot, we want to tell you all, because, quite candidly, you pay the cost for that. So if it's a substation upgrade or some sort of, distribution line or what have you, we want to make sure that we're giving you the most complete analysis back that says, you've asked for this demand, here's what it's going to cost, here's how we can deliver on it. So happy to meet with relevant staff and put them in touch with my colleagues who can help walk them through that process and what that looks like.
Okay. And I just wanted to thank PSE for their partnership on getting our district energy system up and running. I think it's really going to be an impactful way to deliver power to that sector. And people ask me all the time, should we still be doing it? We're moving to all electric usage. Should we still be doing it? And my answer is always, we clearly need way more power generation than we are currently building. We've got to be doing as much as we can. So if we have opportunities to deliver more low carbon power into the system, we've got to be taking those opportunities.
Yeah, agreed.
So thanks for partnering with us on that, and we want to just keep finding those projects that we can say yes to.
Agreed.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Well, mine's still on the generation thing, and I'm concerned as you're legislated by the government and from people that everything looks good on a computer phase two or a piece of paper and pencil. And in reality, you know, I hope we're not gonna get into the spot where we're losing the generation of power, as in closing a coal plant, before we've got something to replace it. You know, generally, as of late, we've always had the cart in front of the horse, and then we figure out, oops, we got to go the other way. And so, is PSC's outlook to make sure that we've got generation, you know, the generated power in place to replace what we're closing down? And can you do that with the push by the government, with the mandates of the dates and times they're putting out? Is that a plausible thing that's going to happen?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes, and why I say that is, so we do lose about 750 megawatts of generation capacity with the closure of the coal-fired plant. But we've just started, it's called the Beaver Creek Project. It's a Montana wind farm that is, I want to say, 850 megawatts. So that's kind of a one-for-one replacement. So we have a little bit of runway to build that project and have it up in generation here in the next couple of years. But it's kind of that's hopefully that's an example that.
But that's basically a flat line load. I'm talking about your peak load, where you have to have that actual generator that can drive that peak load, keep up with it. Whereas with the wind and the solar is that flat generation mode. You're going to have your
Right.
750 megawatts or megawatt, whatever it was. But are we going to replace that generation part that takes the peak load and everybody comes home and turns their stove on and their heat up and everything all at once?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that's where, again, we've talked about Encogen and its role in this conversation. Peaking plant that we can generate that way. I think the battery energy storage systems are going to be something that will help alleviate that peak demand as well. So again, I think we're not going to be in a scenario where we sort of one for one replace it like you're talking about. It's going to be a combination of multiple sources.
But we will be able to replace that amount of power with the multiple sources. We're not gonna lose, right?
That's where we're headed. Yes.
Supposed to be the plan. but,
That's the plan.
You know, when people with suits on in offices start telling the people in the field, this is what you have to do and make it happen in this time frame, I know that a lot of times it's not possible to replenish what you're taking away in that time frame. You know, it needs to be stretched a little further sometimes, because we don't have a lot of the technology yet. We're getting it, but I don't think we have it yet.
Yeah, that's definitely the case in some respects with, again, the large investment in hydrogen. You know, hydrogen's been talked about for decades as a source. And now it's coalescing into what are those projects going to look like? Where does that take us in terms of new technologies or utilizing that technology? Some people think of hydrogen as just a large storage system, you know, for that energy. And so, yeah, what I've told folks before is sometimes it's easier for me to see like 15 years from now than the next like 3 years. Just because we're really early in figuring out what technologies perfect, what does that look like moving forward. I mean, we are working with jurisdictions all the time on just making sure that their code can support wind generation or solar. Those are very real conversations that weren't happening, you know, a decade ago, but now we're engaged in moving that forward. So I think we're headed in that direction. In fact, I know we're headed in that direction. It's can we achieve it? To your point, can we achieve it in that time frame?
Well,
That's the part that concerns me.
can we achieve it at all? I mean, I'm looking at hydrogen. It takes an incredible amount of energy to create hydrogen energy,
Right.
right? So the mass balance there doesn't square yet for it to be a mass energy generator just because of the net usage just to get there.
Right.
So the technology isn't even close yet to being one that we can say is predictable. So we're banking on a lot of things that are still experimental or still we hope to see down the road. Is that a fair statement? Because I don't think hydrogen's there.
It's kind of like going to the casino.
It is a fair statement, Commissioner. I think I would just maybe, what was it in 62 that Kennedy said we were going to go to the moon,
Like you're going to go there,
right?
really?
And in 7 years, they did. So I don't know. I think it's exciting. I think the folks I work with that are much smarter than I am on these issues are very motivated to achieve this goals. It's a real challenge. I think we're headed in that direction. So it's exciting. It's certainly not without its challenges.
I'm sure so.
Yeah, one of the reasons, thank you. One of the reasons I wanted you to come do this is we're keenly interested in economic development. That's what we do that's what the port's involved in. And energy needs and energy pricing, energy availability is key to what we do as a port. So I was keenly interested in making sure that we heard what you were looking at and where we were going down the road. I think bottom line, I'd love to hear from you where you see prices going for us, given the demands that we see. What can we expect to attract? We're not going to get a Bitcoin mining operation anytime soon on the waterfront because we just can't, handle that demand.
Right.
But energy is a key component to what we do and how we bring people on board. We just lost Silfab for reasons not related to this, but solar generation has taken a hit. I think some of the electrification of vehicles, we see those not selling quite the way they were. So I see some really big challenges. I'm
Sure.
not quite as Kennedy-esque as you are in that forecast, because I do see some of the challenges ahead, and I worry about regulation forcing something that isn't there yet. And I'm wondering how that impact is on you. And if we just let the marketplace kind of move along, would it bring our prices down? Would it give us some breathing room? I mean, right now, it must be incredible pressure to try to meet the demands when the technology is not there, the finances aren't there, the infrastructure certainly isn't there. And just hear what you had to say about it.
Yeah, so on the electric vehicle front, charging stations they're going in at a rate that's fairly remarkable at this point. I want to say City of Bellingham is going to add, I want to say it's like 90 stations or charging, plugins over the course of, I think maybe started that last year into this year. So I reference that because you're right. I mean, I think we probably read a lot of the same things, and I've seen the forecasts. I think it was maybe Ford or GM pulled back their forecast on production. Maybe both of them did.
Yeah, they both do.
But I believe is it 2030 or 2032 that an ICE vehicle? I don't know that you can buy a new one in Washington State. So to try and answer your question, I think the market is going to answer some of those things. Range anxiety is a real thing, which is why the charging stations are going in at the rate that they are. The cost of electric vehicles are dropping depending on what kind you want, what options are available to you. So that's one. Say again some of your other, what were you?
You know me, I couldn't remember
He
what I
forgot
asked.
after he said it, you're good to go.
Stream of consciousness.
Yeah, no, I'm
off
kind
to
of
a
the same way.
completely
but
different thought.
Yeah, no, it's, yeah, so
There's regulation forcing something before it's already there to go.
thank you.
That's why we keep you around.
Yeah, I will say, PSE's deeply engaged with state legislators, local elected leadership, federal elected leadership. And so we're trying to inform those conversations the best that we can and sort of truth it for you, maybe to your point about who's making these decisions. You know, when you're in that environment, you don't always get your way, but it's incumbent upon you to have that conversation and tell folks where you're at. So I think you asked also about what are costs going to do. They're going to go up. The pace at which new technology needs to be developed, new infrastructure needs to be, existing infrastructure needs to be maintained, and new infrastructure built is going to require additional cost. And so, as I mentioned, we're a heavily regulated utility by the Utilities Transportation Commission. We present them what we call our general rate case, and they go through it and tell us where we're, that's too ambitious, or that doesn't make sense, or yes, go forward. And so what that looks like is going to be increased costs to all of our customers. Ideally, it's not a burden in the sense that people can't afford it necessarily, but it's the future clean energy, or the clean energy future rather, is not going to be cheap. That's just a reality because of the magnitude of what basically everything that we talked about today. Infrastructure, new technology, all of those things.
Yeah, and I don't dispute that. I just wonder if maybe pushing some of these timeframes. Well, first of all, is there a penalty for not meeting them on PSC?
There is. And I'm sorry, I don't know the sort of fine-grained details on it. I believe the penalty phase is not until like after 2045, and so the interim, the 2030, I think is seen. I don't know that there's a penalty if we're not there by 2030, but again, back to sort of that comment around the 80-20. If we're not there by 2030, that makes 2045 even more challenging. So our goal as a company is to be there by 2030. That's our motivation.
And would those costs be just, I've got to believe they'd be better spread out over a longer period of time. We can still get to the same endpoint and have more options without that kind of regulatory pressure to meet those timeframes. Would we, we certainly could, I believe, spread the pain over a broader area, over a longer timeline than, I just feel a crunch of energy bills, inflation, and it won't be your fault. It'll be something mandated to you.
That's right.
And I see that as being an undue burden without those regulatory pressures. I think the marketplace will eventually catch up, and we'll get to that endpoint, just not in the time frame that they've allocated.
Well, yeah, layman's terms, the faster you try and do a project, you hurry it up, the more cost. And that's kind of what we're doing. That's kind of what the government's doing. They're hurrying along so fast, we don't have the technology, that it's gonna cost the consumer a lot more money to get to 2045 with the bridge gap at 2030. Because you're trying to reach that point at 2030, doesn't.
Yeah, and I agree, it's going to be expensive. I always like to frame that there's also a lot of costs to not doing anything.
That's right.
There's significant costs. We're going to have to use more AC. We're going to have more wildfires. We're going to have a whole cascade of societal impacts. So there's costs either way. And, positioning these investments is something that you have to do, and it's going to cost money no matter what we do here.
You're absolutely right. Yep.
We're here to be a partner with you. Just
Appreciate that.
wanted you to know that.
Yep.
We're thankful that you're doing what you're doing, and reach out to us anytime. We'll certainly be reaching out to you. We know we've got some things on the table.
Yeah, we got a lot to do. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're a good man, Brian. Thanks. All right, moving on. Okay, CJ, you're up next. Small Business Development Center update. Well, we've got a minute here. Kip, if you get a chance to talk to Brian about where he's from, he knows where some of the best fishing in the entire state of Colorado is. Just so you know, just reach out to,
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here. CJ Seitz, Western Washington University Small Business Development Center. I'm also here with Dr. Liliana Deck. She'll be co-presenting with me. So talking today about our 2023 activities, talk a little bit about the background of the program, share with you some client stories, and then some trends that we're seeing. So I'll go through this fast. As you know, you all know what we do. It's a federal program that requires local match and also a host institution of higher education. So it's those three partners coming together. That's why no single SBDC looks the same as another. The bread and butter of what we do is that one-on-one confidential business assistance. We also, where time allows within our requirements, targets that we're meeting, we sit on many committees and boards and try to help out in the community, lending our expertise where it makes the best sense. So this is your SBDC team. These are the certified business advisors. We're also have a small support staff and work with MBA students. As a reminder, all these folks have advanced business education. They're required to be certified with the state. And while we all have that general tool bag of an MBA, everybody has their specialty. So we really do work together as a team to find the best match for the problems or opportunities that we're looking at. Again, as a reminder, everything we do is confidential. We can't tell people who our clients are unless those clients have released that information. So these are the impacts that we report to the SBA. Every impact that we report has to be verified by our clients in writing. And we worked with 466 businesses last year. The capital formation number is capital that we help bring into the community in form of either equity or debt. The total sales and jobs supported is in total what the businesses that we are assisting, their total jobs and sales. And the biggest difference that we really saw last year is this increase in startups. The pandemic really spurred a lot of people wanting to change their lives, do new and different things, and we saw our startup requests go way up. So we had 31 startups, and keep in mind this is people that actually started their businesses. We talked to a lot of people with interesting and great ideas and help them make data-informed decisions, and we don't and should count the amount of people that don't start a business because they came and got some good information.
are you going to break that down by sector to see?
No, I could. I'll follow up with that. I don't have.
Just kind of curious what kind of businesses are starting.
You bet. I'll follow up with you with that information. So beyond what we do with the one-on-one counseling, there's a few highlights that went on in the community in 2023. Yes, the flood continued, and we partnership with Apex and then working with underserved communities. So nobody can forget the flood, but that continued into 2023. As a reminder, the Sheriff's Office asked us to take lead in the response for businesses. We worked closely with the Port and with the Whatcom Community Foundation and with the task force. Part of that was helping get legislative funds that were just particularly for this event. And so getting that money out was quite a bit of energy, as I'm sure you've heard from your staff. And Ash Ryder led that effort in Sumas. We worked with, 42 businesses actually helping prepare those applications. Many people, didn't have the equipment or technology to make the applications. And so that money is all dispersed and completed at this point. This is government contracting. It used to be called PTAC, the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, and now they're called Apex. And we work closely with them. They work with government contracting. They work out of our office. So this is government contracting to the feds, to the state, and to the locals. And this is important to us because we want as much money to land locally as we can possibly help land locally. And to that end, Western Washington University does have a program. They want to have a larger local spend, so we're working really closely with Western to add local vendors for their procurement. So far, we've added 21 local vendors to local procurement. Let's see. So marketing. Marketing's a big job for us. We really want people to know that we're here. We hear all the time, gosh, I wish we would have known that you were here sooner. So there's two goals. One is to get that word out to new clients, and the other goal is to take that lead technical assistance role in our community and get that information out as soon as possible. One of the ways we like to tell our story is by telling our client stories, because that's where the rubber meets the road. So I think this is Holly from Holly's Meat Pies. And then again, we have a newsletter that goes out monthly where we wrap up. It is just technical assistance, all what regulations that are going on, opportunities, funding opportunities. I should mention here that we are a partner with PSE and their Powerful Partnerships this year. So they're trying to get more information to the small business community about the programs they have at PSE. So we're really excited about that this year too. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Liliana Deck.
Liliana Deck, Community Business Development Director at Western Washington University Small Business Development Center. Thank you for the opportunity to share our work with the underserved population of Whatcom County. In my position, I get to bring my personal and professional experience supporting communities farther from opportunity by removing barriers or closing gaps for small business owners. Here, we have a few examples of that, how we are providing technical services and promoting our services in Spanish and English for newcomers in our community. Here we have another example of events that we have attended with the SBDC team. On the left, we have an event in Ferndale with the mayor and the president of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. On the right, we have an event in North Whatcom County, and in the center is Hispanic Heritage Month in Ferndale as well. We have been focusing on informing the Latino-owned businesses, leaders of our community, that we're here to help start, grow, and manage their local businesses. We tell them that our advising is confidential, accessible, reliable, fast, and at no cost to the client. We do this in a culturally relevant manner, accounting for the diversity of the group. Our team has strong ties to the community with partnerships that go back decades, such as the Bellingham Regional Chamber of Commerce, Ferndale, Blaine, and Linden Chamber of Commerce, and multiple nonprofits. In 2022, we expanded to more than 20 partnerships in our community that are also serving the communities we're trying to reach. These partnerships are not the traditional organizations that focus on economic development. Instead, these are the partnerships that reflect the spaces where our community is congregating and where we can connect with established business owners or help them start their own businesses. The idea is to meet the small business owners where they are in their journey as a startup, a growing business, or a mature business. Sorry. These targeted efforts have resulted in an increase in Latino-owned businesses as clients. Our clients have more than doubled to 13%. For context, this is, according to the 2022 census, 10% of our population in Whatcom County identifies as Hispanic or Latino, so we're matching where they are. This slide also reflects that the profile of our clients that we're trying to serve and that we're reaching out to are aligned with the demographic profile of the Whatcom County according to 2022 figures.
Can I ask a quick question?
Me?
Yeah, just about the gaps in the underserved communities. Can you give us the most glaring shortage that we have in engaging the underserved populations and becoming entrepreneurs? Because
I use the Department of Commerce. They have 3 buckets: time, trust, and technology. And I see that reflected in our community.
say that again.
Time, trust, and technology. So when they're trying to start a business, they have another job. So trying to commit to a business owner hours. So I sometimes see my clients later in the day or Saturdays or earlier in the morning to accommodate their time. It takes a little bit longer if we have newcomers who are not from this area to figure out the system. Trust in the institutions that we have, or not even knowing what we have. And then lack of
Could you peel
technology.
the onion off that a little bit? What is the lack of trust in?
That's a whole different presentation.
But it's important.
I understand, yeah. So it is someone who's not from this area and doesn't know how the system works. How do you need to get a business license? How do you pay your taxes? Who do you trust to do your payroll that does a good job? That services like ours exist free of cost. If it's free of cost, who's paying for this? So some of the people we help don't have a college degree, so they don't even know that Western exists. So that's when I'm going to all these places saying, there's a place called the university that hosts an institution like ours, and we can provide with people with MBAs and doctoral degrees advising and support for not just the individual, but for the system, because we see in aggregate, I can see what's happening. So yeah, time, trust, and technology are the kind of the three buckets. Literacy in different, digital literacy. Some people might be able to read and write, but they don't have access to a computer or don't have any digital literacy. And then if you have it depends on the business they're trying to start. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, very good, thanks.
I can probably add a little bit. Liliana's taken me on a couple of her clients and to talk with them about funding, and she had to talk them into talking to me. You know, like, well, why? What's she gonna like? Why? And we already talked to 3 banks, and they won't talk to us. So they're experiencing, barriers already. So they don't want to waste their time. It's hard to apply for a loan. It's hard to do that stuff. So that's one of them. And then the other thing I feel like is different is that they're coming from a sociocentric communities instead of this individualistic, community. And I can't even imagine the shock. I just got back from foreign travel and I have shock, so I can't even imagine that. And then also that not all government, some governments are corrupt. So if they think we're from the government, they've come out of places where there's, extreme issues that I've been able to hear. So that kind of peels back a couple of them.
Yeah. So access to capital is a huge one. Even if you have the money, but you don't have the credit history, no one will give you access to capital. So how do you build your credit while you have this amount of investment? So, yeah. Okay, does that answers the questions there? Okay, so this is our areas of counseling. What did we see this last year? And the things that are really different for us is that startup assistance again. So much requests for startups. And we do vet these startups. Before we start investing time of these counselors, we do vet them. These aren't people with I have 14 ideas, which one's the best? These are people that have really thought and have an idea and want to explore it. So the biggest change for us from 2022 buy-sell was what we were doing most of, and that makes sense, right, with the cost of capital at this point. And then marketing was also bigger in 2022, which is I find sort of interesting. I don't exactly know why, but that's sort of the difference in the requests there. And keep in mind, people come in sometimes and they think they know what they want to talk about, and then you start unpacking it, and their idea of the solution might not, and when you look at data, might not actually be the solution. So a lot of times these conversations turn. These are our industries served, and over the past 3 years, healthcare and social assistance has overtaken service establishments and food accommodations as our biggest industry. So some examples of that are massage and physical therapy, medical offices. We're seeing a lot more of that. And then retail is risen to second place. And we just wanted to talk a little bit about this. So our SBDC advisors, we all work with BIPOC clients, and there are a wide range of industries. So contrary to stereotypes, the distribution of our BIPOC-owned businesses really mirrors the distribution of other businesses in Whatcom County.
So a few client stories here. This is Zazen Salon and Spa. This is Derek Watson. We've been working with him for over a year when he bought the business. And you can see here some of the stuff. This is Ash Ryder's client, some of the areas that she works with him, all the way from profitability to company culture, working with different tools to help him manage his business well. Another client of ours, they've been with us, I believe, since 2019, Northwest Gastro and Endo. I think they employ over 50 people here. This is Eric Grimstead's client, and he's been assisting them with expansion plans, looking at buying property, build to own, looking at the cost benefits of that. He's also doing some valuations for what I want to say here, for buying out of a minority investment partner. We've been working with them for some time.
And here we have one of my clients that came to us after one of their outreach events. It has been a joy to work with Enriqueta and watch her dream of becoming a caterer in our community. This client is a perfect example of how technical advising in Spanish can be leveraged for minority-owned businesses, and contributes a sense of belonging not just for the client, but for the community that this person serves. So this client reflects, like many of mine in experience. I've been in this position for a little bit over a year and a half, and I believe we can make this community stronger one business at a time. Thank you.
All right, wrapping it up with some of the trends that we see. I know you all like to kind of hear what we're seeing out there, and none of this is shocking. Of course, there's the capital restrictions and the having to refinance commercial loans and the cost of money going way up for some of our clients, and watching them how to creatively scramble to make that happen. Startup funding is, abysmal at this point, and we're working, and also just having credit history for some of our newcomers. So we're working closely with the Whatcom Community Foundation and 3 lending institutions to start some micro loan financing that would be in partnership with the Community Foundation, the lending institution, and the SBDC. I'm really excited about that. Did you know there's hiring challenges? It really is. So we work a lot with our clients. Hopefully, we're being proactive, and we're reaching out to our clients and saying, we know this is coming, and helping them make decisions about how they're going to remain profitable when their costs are going up. And also just the retention of good workers is so important right now. Still supply chain issues. We're seeing this get a little bit better, but again, people hoarded during the COVID, and the cost of carrying inventory is expensive. So we're still working with clients on that front. Everything associated with real estate is sort of slowed down. And artificial intelligence, we're keeping our eye on that as much as we can. People are already getting into it, alternatives for employees, and also we're seeing it affect some of the creative industries. So here's my end game slide. I don't know how I match up to the airport or to BSC, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Shepard?
One question, we at the port have been doing some work, and I'll certainly call out some of the work Gina Stark has done to mobilize port efforts in the community, so community businesses know about us, know how to interact with us. Do you feel that there are any lingering barriers, or can we do more so that clients, particularly some of those minority or BIPOC clients that may be emerging, know how to bid on projects at the port, know how to be contracted with us to make bids when we have projects, and participate in those kind of government contracts that we may have available? I think it's good for our community as a whole, and we're always looking for a more competitive bid environment so that we're able to try and deal with high costs for project bids as well.
Yeah, so it's one of the incentives when we partner and I share the opportunities in our community. That's one of them. CJ mentioned Kara comes to our meeting, to our office once a month, and I'm available to meet with our clients. So we're trying to build stronger partnerships with all the players in the community. And And then we don't really host events, but we get to attend other people's events. So I make sure that I get invited every place where we need to be.
You know, the trust building that Liliana's done in this community has been incredible, and the partners that she's done it. She really undersells her work. The places where she spends her time. She's currently doing a study with our refugee. Refugee clients. So there is that. You know, we work together in partnership with the port and other economic development providers. I work really closely with all three, Corey and John and Gina. We work really closely so that we're delivering a whole package, an array of services when we're talking to clients. So I'm out there, I'm not just out there talking about the SBDC. I'm like, this is all these options, you know, here's where you network, here's advocacy. Having said that, you know, the more clients work with us to be ready to work with government contracting, because as you know, there's, you know, requirements, and then it would be interesting to talk more about that and to talk about what we've learned at Western, to some flexibility that they've, you know, for example, you know, with cash flow insurance, you know, that we've looked at in order to make those possibilities real for businesses that are small. So I'm always interested in that topic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last question for me. Are we seeing you know, we heard a lot prior to the pandemic about the silver tsunami coming. I didn't hear it come up at all today. Are we still seeing this on the horizon? Is this still, are we at it? Is it hitting, or?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it just, you know, paused a lot of it. And Whatcom County has a large concentration of small business. One of the highest in Washington State. You know, we are entrepreneurial here. And so, yeah, you know, and we're working also with, in partnership with many, many organizations, Sustainable Connections and Whatcom Community Foundation on employee ownership to help with that, and there's some funding mechanisms behind the scenes with the feds to help with that also. So yes, we're out there trying to get the word out all the time about the level of work that we do at the SBDC to help people be ready to, and you know, and also work with buyers. So absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Briscoe.
Thank you. One question that kind of leans into the silver tsunami, so to speak. Do you find business owners financing the people that are, you know, I mean, carrying the contract, so to speak, on businesses? Is there a lot of that? Is there more of that going on now that money's become harder to find and the interest rates are up higher? Do we see more of that in our county?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting topic, for sure. You know, it sort of depends what you're selling, right? So is this a business that's mostly cash flow business? Like, I'm working with one that's $5 million valuation, hardly any assets. And so is a bank going to touch that? Probably not fully. They're going to want to spread their risk. I should mention in this that we also work with in stacking funding. I work with John on the EDI loan fund that you all have, and so to spread that risk around. So I think it's a case by case. If it has large, if you have a building, it's pretty easy for a bank to, you know, get excited about it. But we see owners carrying partial contracts a lot, and also, you know, keeping their skin in the game is good for the new owner too oftentimes. So. I usually don't see any owner carrying the whole contract. Most of them aren't super interested in that, and so we usually do a funding stack.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your presentation. Good.
Yeah.
I've got a couple. Can you go back to the client served graph? And I'm just wondering,
We'll get there.
in those sectors.
Oh, the industries?
Industry served, yeah. Maybe the next one was the one I was looking at. Come back. Sorry, the other way. No, the other way, sorry. I had a specific question about, yeah, so, no, it wasn't that. The question was in the client served. How much of it is on the buy side? How much of it on the sell side? Are your consultations leaning by sector in any direction, that you're giving more counseling to people exiting? That would be a signal to us that we needed to retool something versus startups. you say you had a lot of startups, you had like 30 of them. So are you seeing a trend that you've got more startups than shutdowns, or how does that break out?
Yeah, I'll have to look at the data to be able to, have an informed answer to that one. And keep in mind, all this is anecdotal, right? So we're working with a small population of people that actually are seeking help, right? That don't have C-level executives sitting with them most of the time. So I'll have to look at it. I personally, I work with manufacturing and construction. That's what I work on. So I'm seeing that more. And of course, the business selling and buying that piece, that chunk of work is way more complicated than a startup. Like a lot more hours are going to be put into the startups. And so, that capacity that we have to, sometimes we can have a startup conversation in an hour and a half and walk people right to that decision, pretty easily. But I will look at the industries that we're doing startups, and I will look at the industries where we're doing buy-sell work and see if, let you know what we see.
I just have a general impression, and it may be wrong just because of my take on life, but I just see more people exiting the small business world than I see entering. Mm-hmm. And I'm just trying to see if that's an accurate perception.
One of the tools we have is we have a lot of opportunities for people to get trained in starting a business. So there's a lot of in-person, online, here in Skagit, and people use those resources. So it's easy for us to funnel, say, take the class and then come back and talk to us. And then once you figure things out, we can walk with them. So there's a lot of resources available in multiple languages, actually, for that, for startups.
Are you interested in the net effect? Is that what you're trying to get to, Commissioner Bell?
Looking for trends, looking to see if we're losing more. I just think the business environment right now is very unfriendly. When you have high interest rates and you've got a city like Bellingham putting higher minimum wages on, work inside the city, my general impression is that it's very difficult to do a startup anywhere. But particularly hard here.
I think in general the burden, my opinion, the burden on small business is pretty heavy, for sure.
2 years to get a permit to build something. All of that.
Healthcare, paid leave, all this stuff that goes on into the businesses and all the things that need to
Staffing.
We're looking at business owners to be able to solve problems.
So I've got an overwhelming perception that it's just very difficult, and we're going to see more people leaving the marketplace than we are entering, just because of those challenges.
Yeah, I'll actually talk to my friends over at the CBER. I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Hart Hodges and James McCafferty, and to see they'll probably have a larger look at those trends. We do have data on aggregate about business licenses coming in and out that we can look at, not by sector, unfortunately, unless I put a special request in, which I can do. Yeah, it is interesting that I don't see that, but I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, and I could be completely off. And just a personal note, I just think it's incredibly difficult to start a business, and I particularly care about the minority communities, underserved communities, having the perception that it's harder for them than it is for others, and it's very difficult to wade through those waters, and how we can change that perception so that they feel they're on an equal footing somewhere along the way, because it's not easy for anybody. I've been told to pound sand when I go in for a loan, right? But I've got a perception that if I'm persistent, I can keep going. How do we flip that perception?
Yeah, and I dare I say that it's more than a perception. It is a reality.
Yeah.
It is real that it's harder for people that don't have credit, that have had structural barriers for generations, right? That haven't had accumulated wealth. It is a real thing. The stories I hear, not just from the Latino population, and so people of color with master's degrees not getting a full sit down at a bank. It's real, and. The way that we're hoping to tackle it is by gaining trust, Liliana being in those communities and gaining those trusts, and working with people like yourselves and other partners that want to have creative, local creative solutions to really help everybody thrive and be welcome here.
And with a shift in our demographic, we're going to have production from that end, so we've got to overcome that, or we're not going to survive this.
Absolutely.
That's rather doomsday-ish, but it's going to be
Well,
more
I mean-
difficult to survive.
Well, and Liliana, I think you know the statistic of the demographic of Bellingham school districts, right? So there.
Yeah, so there's a census data and there's the school data. And so what is happening, I get the trends in a different way. And I guess I'm optimistic in the sense like I see a lot of more partnerships going on. So I hear there's a lot of barriers, but I see a huge commitment from LNI, Department of Commerce, Department of Transportation, Apex. Everyone said, how can we help? What can we do? And then my job is to build those bridges and say, okay, this agency is giving you free energy audits. How can we do this? This Western is trying to, like local vendors, how can we support that? So getting to say, okay, here's a pocket, and I might not tell the business owner, I might tell the trusted leader in that community. And that trusted leader trusts me. So it's a very delicate dance, if you will, that we navigate every day. And I don't have an absolute answer. It's almost like day by day that we play it. So we do have a strategic plan, but we have to adjust in real time.
I just wanted to say how lucky we are to have Liliana here. Actually, the state's looking towards her work and asking her for advice, and she's advising on broad initiatives, and I'm really proud of the work that she's doing. Yeah, sorry, embarrassing. You have any more questions?
No, also a big fan of apprenticeship programs and trying to train up people, because we are seeing a tremendous staffing shortage. I mean, I'm getting killed in my business just from a lack of staffing. And so how can we get more trained people into that arena?
I'd love to chat with you.
Huge challenge.
Yeah, I'd love to chat with you about that. I mean, I want to put a plug in for the Northwest Workforce Council. They have some new leadership there that we're working closely with, and they're movers and shakers and innovators. And so, of course, we see the trades that, you know, with the last recession, right, this kind of fell off. And now here we are, like, oh my gosh, we need all this work. Mega project is one of them, right? Like, I want that money to come home, right? And so, and I know that they're looking at it, but I think having a relationship with the Northwest Workforce Council will really benefit the port.
Want to talk about it now? These guys can take over.
Yeah, we can just, yeah. But I'd be happy to set that up.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's all for me.
thank you.
Thank you very
Anything
much.
else?
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
All right, we're going to go to other business. We'll go to public comment if anybody in the audience has something they would like to say to the commission, or anybody online. Before we go to other business, if you do, just make yourself known and we'll find a way to unmute you. Thank you. Okay. With that, we will go to other business. Commissioner Shepard?
All right, a couple things. I just wanted to start out with a big thank you to staff, and really a particular shout out to our legal department. They don't always get a lot of shout out, but Holly and her staff did a really fantastic job managing a complex issue for us with our departure from our termination of the ABC lease. It was a pretty challenging task, and our team really set us up to be able to be successful by having a lease that we could negotiate and that we could enforce. And that made our ability to take action when we needed to possible. And I guess just as you know, facilitated that successful resolution as well as we could have. So I really do want to thank you for that. Staff had a lot of responsibility in that as well. We had a big team who helped get us through lots of challenging public comment, lots of challenging questions, and lots of just complex interaction. And so Tiffany and her team, Brian and his team, Rob, and the rest of the staff, I really appreciate everything that they did to get us through this process and to keep improving and making informed and better decisions as we go. We're all here to learn, and it's really big to have the support and such a great team working with us.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to give a shout out to the rest of the team as well, some of whom are in the room today, some I think are probably online. They made that kind of that end part of that process very smooth because of all the work that Rob, Tiffany, Brian, Dave, everyone has put into it to get to that point. So it really is a team effort, and I'm happy to be part of this team. You guys are great.
Thanks. Looking forward, I'd love to have Matt do a future presentation for us on what we can expect in the future. I think we're getting lots of questions from the public about what's next. We took an action with ABC, and there's questions about where we're going to go in the future. And I think it would be nice for us all to hear some of those updates. We get them occasionally in our briefings on Fridays, but for us and the public to know what kind of grants we're going after, what kind of contracts we may be looking to in the future that support our working waterfront, keep people employed, and do work that is compatible with our commitments that we have. So it's something I would like to see.
Matt Elliott and I have discussed that, and we have a presentation in the future. So we'll get that on the calendar and get it to you.
Great. Two other ones, I talked with Rob this week. We've previously talked about having a more dedicated conversation about future planning for the waterfront. And I asked Rob if we could kind of get that moving up. We've all talked about the interest, just making sure that, we have a new opportunity now that we are taking more of a lead of master developer. And I think it's a good opportunity for the commission to make sure we're on the same page with what are our next opportunities for development. What do we see as the most exciting, most pressing opportunities for the sequence of development? What are we not interested in next? And how can we have some of that internal conversation while we also contemplate ways that the public can have some of their input as well? So I'd love to see us do that as a before meeting or some kind of work session in the upcoming future.
Yeah, that was actually on my list to say, I would like to move that up to the next one. We're going to do Blaine on Thursday. Part of my other business is I wanted to announce that we're having a public meeting on Thursday at 8:30 to go through the Blaine infrastructure. Let's move this one up to be the next one where we have that public comment, because I do think it's important. Most of the comments that I've had back are the what's next. And
Can you clarify? Move up.
so the vision that I had was that we were going to go through the port areas
Right.
and just have a commission meeting about all of those areas so we
Right.
could sit down and just talk about them.
Right.
And I was just going to work my way down the waterfront, and the waterfront discussion was going to be in sequence somewhere in there, but I'm just saying, let's move that one to the next one, because we're going to get to all of them eventually before the year's over. But I just want to move the waterfront to the next, and the shipping terminal.
And when you say the next one,
I
the
want to
next
have,
commission meeting or?
no, the next work session that we have.
Oh, okay, because that was my confusion. Are we talking about the end of the month? We're going to have this all prepared to talk about it?
Thursday.
Well, let's blame.
No.
That's the day after tomorrow.
Up to the next one. And,
And it should be a time when we're all here too.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, and we're going to have a discussion on Thursday about Blaine, and
Yeah.
nothing says that we can't talk about what happens next. We're all going to be there.
That was I was trying to figure out if we're talking about the next commission meeting we're going to talk about.
No.
Okay.
No,
Very-
just one
very
of these
good.
work sessions.
That was my question.
So that's fair enough. We'll have Carrie put together a date that works for all of you and get it on the calendar as well.
My last one is another presentation request. We've gotten some questions about use of land around the airport for development, and just when I was talking with Rob about it, sparked some just questions for me about what can we expect for real estate opportunities and needs in and around the airport. I would love to hear an update of both inside and outside the fence of what we can anticipate for development potential. We've talked I kind of have some vague ideas. Sunil had described some vague ideas about development potential. And I know the aerospace industry is continuing to grow. It's important in Whatcom County. It's important in Washington State. And what can we do to position ourselves to capture as much of that as possible into the future? Whether it's EV, aircraft, or automated aircraft, or just aircraft repair. What are those kind of things on our horizon that we can be thinking about working towards? And are there some actions that we should be taking to prepare to get there? I know that's kind of a large, vague question that I'm asking, but it would be nice for me to feel like I had some better ways to articulate answers to those questions. Does that sound possible?
And how are we marketing it? How are we marketing that?
That's totally part of it. How are we positioning ourselves so people know about us? But I think even to be able to market, like what are we going to market? I don't even have that as a clear answer other than
dirt, right?
We got some dirt. And we got willing, staff and expertise that can help get you there. But what else should we be doing to capture some of this market?
So I've got BST future presentation, what we're going to do for business there. That'll be at a regular commission meeting. We'll add the airport development to a regular commission meeting, and then we'll schedule a special work session for waterfront planning.
Thank you.
On that note, when you look at the electrification stuff we just went through, there's a huge opportunity out there to provide a lot of power to a potential industry that comes through
Definitely.
alternative sources.
And with some, I think, interesting potential for battery storage too.
Commissioner Briscoe?
I
Other
have
business?
a couple things. First, it's a little ways away, but I want to bring it up now so people start thinking about it. We've got the blessing of the fleet in Blaine on May 5th at our Blaine Boating Center, and I'd like to start getting it out so people are aware of it, and we can kind of get that around. And also, we've got the blessing of the fleet in Squalicum at Zawanich Park there at the boathouse on May 10th. That's at 11 a.m. and the one in Blaine is at 1:30 p.m. So everybody kind of get that on the calendar and pass that along to other staff members and the people as we see it. So those are two events that are both happy and sad.
The blessing of the fleet at Squalicum is May 11th, Saturday, May 11th.
But that's, you're right, it's the 11th.
Yeah.
Excuse me, it's 11th. It's the day before Mother's Day. Things about our gear storage yards, and I want to kind of bring this up, and so it's on my radar, so to speak, that we got a couple things that we need to start pushing on and get done. Just like our web lockers, things are being taken advantage of by people that are getting cheap storage. And I think we need to tighten up, and I'm just talking about this. I'm not looking to start it, but I want people to be aware that this is where I'm going with this. Is we've got people who've got stuff in there that doesn't ever get used. And, we're limited on space. And just like our web lockers, the gear storage yard is for our fishermen, our active fishermen, and our startup fishermen that are come along and need a place because they don't have a lot of property, to build a building on or whatever. We've got guys that got stuff that's been sitting in our storage yards that we moved from that one over to the other one they haven't used for 10 years. And I make friends this way. And I'm really tired of the abuse, and I'm ashamed of some of my fellow fishermen that taking advantage of the situation, and I want it to stop. And I want it to stop under my watch. So, Tiffany, I'm just letting you know where I'm going with this. I think that we got to come up with some rules and some of the things I thought of. The gear is required to be used once every other year or every 2 years. That gear needs to be used. And they got to show participation in the fisheries, and they either need to live in Whatcom County or they got a boat in the marina. We're not supporting every Tom, Dick, and Harry from here to there with cheap storage. That's not what it was intended for, and not everyone is taking advantage of the situation, but there are some individuals. And I've spoken with Aaron a little bit. I haven't really spoken with Tiffany too much about it, but that's, you know, something that we need to look at. We've already gone through the lockers. We still got some things to do there to get it squared away so that that's, you know, where it should be. We've done well with our mortgage stuff, and we've got that kind of straightened out, and we need to clean up the storage yard thing so it's not being abused, so. Just kind of putting everybody on notice, that's where I'm headed. That's all I have, sir.
All right, and then I'll just reiterate, mine was that we have a public meeting on Thursday at 8:30 at the Plain Boathouse for us to discuss.
That's AM, correct?
AM in the morning.
Just want to know if I need to work cocktail time or breakfast time.
Of that, meeting adjourned.